Good morning. You said 48, 49. That's one
and last one was 50. This is number 51, by the way. Hi, folks.
Hi.
If anybody's listening.
Yes. I think we had alienated the rest of our last 3 listeners at our last podcast.
You know, aliens are a really big topic today, so alienating people could be a gift.
In fact,
but we're not talking about that today.
There's lots of pictures coming out, that I truly believe on the internet.
Aliens waving.
Yeah, the saucer thing that was out yesterday.
Yeah.
Brand new one. Yeah.
Well, you know what today is. You do know what today is.
Yeah, it's the end of my isolation.
No. Do you know what today is?
And anybody watching this is probably going to get COVID because they're watching.
Anybody under 50 would not have any idea what today is.
Today is
July 20.
Yeah, you're right. It is July 20th.
It is. It's July 20,
1969.
I was laying on my back in my backyard, looking up at the sky, wondering, could I actually see the Apollo landing on the moon with my naked eye?
Oh,
the answer is no. It's way too small. And at 230,000 miles away, there's no way in the world you could see it. That was today.
But that was all done, that was all
in a studio, in a back lot. And
all you got to do is go to the internet, and they'll tell you how wrong it was.
Okay.
All right. So, which makes people really anxious because they thought their whole life it was real, and now it's not real. So they're totally anxious.
People are not going to watch Gripping Reality or tell their friends to watch Gripping Reality. So sorry. I'm the serious part of this team.
Well, I've been cooped up for 5 days. What do you expect?
Yeah. See, you get COVID. I'm immune.
Yeah. Well, that's because you're too nasty. It doesn't like you. You got to be nastier than the bug.
Mosquitoes land on my skin and they just fly away without biting me because.
Why do I believe that?
There's actually no blood in this guy. Only female mosquitoes bite, males do not.
Yes, I know that. Males are much gentler and kinder.
It's the women of the world. No, let's not go there.
Please stop. Oh, Carl. This is really bad. So anxiety, you want to talk about you're anxious?
We do a lot of training. Mike and I do. I do individual training. Mike does a lot of consulting. We do a lot of team training together. If anybody ever wants a comic team that knows what they're talking about, you could hire Myke and Mike, which is us. I'm referring to us in third person, but it's actually us. And on Monday, our church has a preschool program and wraparound childcare, and so in order to have ongoing staff training, we do regular events for our staff. And the director, who's my wife, Pam, asked if I would take a segment of a portion of a part of the book, Why Do People Act That Way and What Can I Do About It, and do a training on anxiety. Particularly, how do staff and parents recognize emergent anxiety in their children, because they often don't have words to describe what they're feeling accurately. So they'll act out, or it may substitute with a more common feeling. So to do training for our staff, we have quite a number of young staff people and parents on the topic of anxiety. And so I thought, well, for getting prepped for that particular training event next Monday, we're going to record that, and then eventually it will be available as a segment piece. I thought it'd be good for Mike and I to chat about anxiety. And he said, so we're going to talk about worry. And I posed the insightful question, is worry the same thing as anxiety? And I don't know that I have. If worry is the same thing as anxiety, then let's just eliminate one of the words and we'll never have anxiety again because we worry all the time, or
Right.
we don't worry about anything because we have anxiety. Is it exactly the same thing or is it different? But what is anxiety? How do you feel it? How do you recognize it in yourself? How do you recognize it in children or in others who can't necessarily communicate at a very, very high level? Um, what is anxiety and how do you deal with it? Is there any solution? Is there any resolve
Yeah.
for
Right.
anxiety?
Right. Well, that's. I mean, I think the obvious is the defining what does it mean to have anxiety or to be anxious. Um, is there a, and you're right, there needs to be a delineation between the two of anxious and worry, um, which is kind of fascinating. And the point is, you asked me this morning before we came on, well, let's talk about this. And I said, well, the world is really has tons of anxiety and anxiousness. You go, well, where'd you get that from? And right, from a standpoint of if we're trying to pull down data, we could probably do that. Excuse me. But the reality of where we are living right now, in the times we're living in our culture, in our country, there are some very, very real things that are causing anxiousness, if you will, i.e., I wouldn't say that's the same as worry in my mind, because I think in my defining is anxiousness and worry uh, are words within the same continuum, but one is, I would say, one is
More intense,
more intense than the other one.
more active. So
Yeah.
you just made a comment that is conventionally accepted that I do not accept.
All right, go for it.
And you said, and I'm quoting in rough terms, we could play the tape back, but I'm not going to do that. There are a number of aspects of the modern world that are causing anxiety. And one of the challenges that I have is nothing causes anxiety.
Okay.
Anxiety is a response. I just saw a picture of a person who's visiting the state of Maryland, and they got a picture of a copperhead snake crawling across the road in front of them. And the person's comment was, this copperhead made me so scared. And I thought that's a very unhealthy self description. The copperhead snake is doing what copperhead snakes do, crawling across the road, slithering. It was doing that before. It's going to do it again. The snake does it over and over and over. So my perception of the snake, what I believe it might do to me,
Right.
my response to that can be anxiety, fear,
Right.
delight, enjoyment, fascination, terror. I have all kinds of I could be a child of the age of 3 and say, "Oh, pretty snake," and go running to catch it, and my parent would scream in horror, snatch me away, and attempt to stomp the snake to death because I have no idea what danger I'm in. But
Right.
I might not be in any danger. I
Right.
might be, but I might not be. So when you say the environment causes anxiety, I want to back up to that and say, I have a response of anxiety. My question is, why do I feel that way? Why does my child
Excuse me.
feel anxiety? Why is that a response or a reaction to certain stimuli that are occurring in the world? Because the very same activity, the same event for one person might stimulate anxiety in them and somebody else thrill or gratitude. And so if the event can cause something, that should actually be fairly universal, but it's not.
Right.
So backing up a step allows me to think about the topic of anxiety maybe in more fresh terms than the world, the finances, COVID, wildfires. Pick a topic: war in Ukraine, gas prices, cause me to be anxious. Here's the challenge I have for that. If those events are in control of my anxiety, I will not stop feeling anxiety until that source stops its control over me, which may never happen, in which case I will be anxious forever.
Right.
And I blame, pick a topic. I may go from one topic to the next because anxiety is a major part of my life. So let's first begin by defining anxiety within our terminology. How do we see anxiety?
And I would say I would agree with you. You know that it's our response because it's exactly what we teach.
Then
And
stop
so
saying it made me.
no, because I had to give
I'm
you
going
a
to nail you every time.
I had to give
And
you a
if you say anything,
segue.
I'm going to interrupt you
Yeah, it's going to give you a
until you get
segue.
so annoyed.
That's right. I gave you a segue. You should be happy. You
I've
know,
not
now,
should. I
yeah, you should, and you need to, and you must,
don't
and
go
you
there.
ought
Don't
to be
go there.
happy.
Don't go there.
You are deserving every bit of this just right now.
I
Have
do
I made you
deserve it.
anxious yet? That's what I want to know.
I do deserve it and I love it. That's fine. All right. So, how do we define anxiety? In what of the emotional systems do we place the normal anxiety? Sounds really odd to call it normal
Oh
anxiety,
God,
but where do we put normal anxiety?
it's in fear, isn't it?
It's a function of fear
Right.
in the emotional system
So,
we call exposure.
exposure. Right.
So
Right.
exposure is stimulated by my perception of what? What am I lacking if I have feelings of exposure?
I would say security.
Security, safety,
Right.
some
I mean
kind
that
of
whole sense of
right,
protection.
right,
No harm done. Those
right.
kinds of
So
things.
if I begin to have anxious feelings, it's reasonable to start the conversation by saying, where are you not safe? Or where are your feet, your life not in a secure place? Can you describe that? Even to a young child at the age of 3 or 4 or 5,
Right. Exactly.
why don't you feel safe
Right.
right now?
Right.
And because that the word anxiety is a 4-syllable word that many young children, you say, "Are you scared?" Even
Right.
to a 2 or 3-year-old, they may parrot back, "I'm scared." They're learning how the language fits the feelings they have, but the
Right.
feelings
Right.
have no words yet. But
Right.
when you say, "Are you feeling a mild bit of anxiety?" It's like blah 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 blah. I see your mouth
Yeah.
moving, but I don't know
Yeah.
what you're saying. So the challenge is, how do we enable a young child or ourselves or our elderly parents to have a more accurate way of processing what we're feeling, what we're perceiving in the area of exposure, fear,
Right. Right.
concerning stimulus factors that say to me, I'm not safe, I'm not secure, I'm not protected right now.
Right.
And I might actually not be safe,
Right.
but I might be safe, but believe I'm not.
Right.
The reaction of the feelings are exactly the same, whether I'm really in danger or I
Right.
only believe I'm in danger, but I'm not.
So let's take a scenario of a child. Let's say a child Normally at bedtime, you go through the bedtime routine and life is good and they have their, cup of water. You do go in, tuck them in, do your prayers with them. They drift off to sleep, not a problem. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, um, there seems that when you get ready to leave the room, they're calling out to you and saying, can you just sit here for a while? Can you just be with me? And then you go, sure. So
Well,
you
that's
sit
a
there
pretty
for,
complex mental. They may just
right.
start crying.
Or they start crying, or they're whimpering, or you leave the room and you're gone for 2 minutes and out they come. And this has not been the norm at all. So now all of a sudden you're saying, well, then you're putting them back to bed. And I mean, you have choices at this point of, getting frustrated because they're not staying in bed, or you start identifying the fact that there's something different going on here and be able to start asking them very simple questions of that whole thing. Honey, why are you afraid? Why do you want to be out of bed? I think that it's crawling into those kinds of questions where the child of getting to that fear factor of what is it that you're afraid of? What's
That's
causing you?
interesting because you're inciting the language of fear by asking the question that way.
So how would you ask it?
What are you feeling right now? Can you tell me what you're feeling? Not
Okay,
what are you afraid of?
what are you
I
feeling?
could say, so what are you angry about? Or what are you happy about? Or what are you excited about? I can add any word in there, but when I put it, you turn the lights off and the parent has the idea my child might be afraid, so I'm going to introduce that idea
Okay, that's
as
fair.
opposed to a truly neutral, what are you feeling right now?
Right,
And if they say my stomach hurts, well, that can be a sign of anxiety. It also can be they're about ready to throw up.
right.
So instead of adding conclusions into the conversation, the best is to allow them to begin drawing on their own experience and explore that with them. The child responds, "It's dark." How do you feel about the dark? As opposed to, are you scared of the dark?
Right,
Or,
right.
come on, grow up. You're 4 years old. You shouldn't be scared of the dark. Don't ask the questions that way.
No,
Let
I
them
agree with that.
explore.
Right.
How do you feel about the dark? Well, I'm scared. What is it about the dark that's scary to you? Now it
Right.
allows them, so they're beginning to put into words. And if they run into, I don't know how to say it, instead of implanting other words, are there monsters under your bed or in the closet?
Right.
Are you afraid something's going to jump out and grab you in the dark? Don't ask questions that way. Say, well,
Right.
tell me what you do feel. What can you describe? And see where they go with that. And that
Hmm.
often changes the orientation of the conversation quite a bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I see that. I understand that. I just think that, I mean, a lot of times is that, to me, is that enter into the conversation not from a standpoint of necessarily judgmental in the sense of, okay, this is bad behavior because they're not obeying. I think that's the tendency for most of us, most parents, is to jump to that conclusion. They're just disobeying us.
Right.
When, you know, in my scenario, it's like, well, because my son went over to somebody's house and watched Monsters Inc., and which is a great movie, but he
A great
decided that,
movie for an 8-year-old,
right, but not for a 4-year-old.
not for a 4-year-old.
Yeah, because now there's monsters everywhere,
Right.
and so he's afraid to go to sleep. Um, there's that anxiousness, that fear factor of, well, if I close my eyes, then the monsters are going to come out.
Well, and the other challenge is when the news is on, it's not necessarily Monsters Inc. But
Right,
when a 3 or 4 year old child, maybe even 2, actually has a mental image and an understanding of McDonald's,
right,
the big yellow M
right,
against a red background. They understand the word McDonald's. They can say the word McDonald's. I'm picking
right,
on that brand because it's very nearly universal.
right,
And when there is a shooting at a McDonald's and a child who's 2 or 3 or 4 years old hears guns, people shot, McDonald's, their brain can say, every time I go to McDonald's, I'm going to get shot. Now, they
right,
don't think that complicated of an idea,
right,
but McDonald's is now associated with people getting shot
correct,
and screaming and crying and the police coming and
right,
people talking angrily and so on and so forth. So those are all feeling level aspects of the world, but a 2 or 3 or 4 year old child, even an 8, 10, 12-year-old child can see that, hear a snatch of it on television. You didn't have them watch all of Monsters Inc., but they have the idea that people get shot at McDonald's and we're going to McDonald's tomorrow as a treat,
right,
and they cannot get to sleep.
right, right. Agreed.
So now the child's experiencing an authentic anxiety
Right,
that really is not based in reality, but it might be.
right,
And they have no way of resolving that at all.
right, right,
So when the lights go out and we're going to McDonald's for a treat tomorrow, they have a nighttime of terror, and the parent has no idea why.
right.
That's one of the reasons why. So when you say, let's go back to that conversation. So how are you feeling right now? I'm scared. Well, what are you scared of? Going to McDonald's. And you're going, what? Because you don't see any possible connection between a response of fear or
Right,
worry or anxiety and a treat of going to McDonald's, because your brain is not 3 years old, having
right,
heard a news story about somebody being shot or a conversation. Child's in the back seat. You think they're asleep. They're hearing the conversation in the front seat. It can be enough to create anxiety. So if anxiety is a different level of fear, worry, um, any of the exposure words, it's in there somewhere. So 4 syllables. It's fairly complicated thinking, but the feeling of fear is a common human response
right,
to danger, a lack of safety and security,
right,
feeling like you're falling, like there's danger. So it's appropriate to have fear response. If you have no fear at all, that could end your life. Walk
right.
out in front of cars and traffic,
Exactly.
you have no fear. Walk at the edge of a cliff, get a selfie because you want to lean over and you're gone.
Right,
People without fear uh, are in great danger often and
right,
have no perception of it.
right. Exactly.
So what does anxiety feel like? How do you know anxious feelings are beginning to occur? What have you seen in people, children or adults, that would be anxiety symptoms?
Uh, I would have to say that probably one of the fundamental things I viewed, I would say across the board, is this deep sense of lack of control or influence over what is transpiring outside of my realm, to be able to fix it, to be able to make it right. And so,
But what does anxiety feel like inside of you?
well, inside of a person, I think it's that angst of of I don't want to say cataclysmic, but that sense of apocalyptic feel that it's going to all come crashing down.
Well, that would be an extreme level. That's terror. That's out of control.
But I think from a standpoint, well, let's just take someone who is in a relationship, and the relationship is I mean, I deal with this all the time. The relationship is not going well,
Okay.
and usually the guy has more vested in it than the girl, and so consequently
Or at least in the
there's
scenario you're describing, because you deal a
right,
lot with guys.
right.
The people
So
who deal with girls would say the girls have a lot more
I'm on more
invested
of
in
those,
it than
right,
guys do. Blah,
right.
blah, blah.
Anyway, in my world, that's what I deal with, frequently. In fact, even now. And so there's this sense of where I can't make it. Um, I don't have the control over it. I don't have the facilitation over it to be able to get the security, which comes back to what we were talking about, can get the security in the relationship. So that feeling inside is that of helplessness, that feeling inside of angst, of I don't know what to do.
So
Um,
those are mental processes. What I'm asking is, for some people, there's a knot that occurs right below the sternum, right above the
right.
stomach.
Or the
It's a
chest
knot.
is
It's
tight. Yeah.
feeling like there's an
Right.
actual
Tension,
pinch.
physical. Right.
Right. For other
Right.
people, it will be, I can't get my breath.
Right.
For
I
other
agree with you.
people, anxiety can be, I have a stomach ache or I get a migraine.
Right.
My nose won't stop running.
Right.
Um, I have uh, a choke. My throat is constricted. So those are like body symptoms.
Right. I agree. Okay. I
So when
understand
a
what you're asking.
child's trying to go to sleep and they're clutching their chest, their heart,
Right.
or they're
Right.
holding their stomach, or you see them wiping tears away from their eyes or holding their head, you can go there and ask questions not about the anxiety. Does your tummy hurt?
Right.
What does it feel like in your chest?
Right.
Tell me about your head. Not do you have a headache? Tell me about your head.
Right.
And then they can begin to describe that feeling. Oddly, one of the ways of dealing with anxiety is deal with that symptom. You
Right.
can't get your breath. Okay. Before we talk about why you feel so anxious, let's take 5 minutes and just breathe together.
Right.
Breathe in, breathe out. Or your stomach hurts. All right, sit up straighter, stretch backwards, and you're actually dealing purely with a symptom. But if you can have a person concentrate, here's why I think that works. Anxiety or fear of being in danger is often, not always, but often, I don't have the ability to be safe. If I can control my breathing, if I can stretch my stomach muscles, if I can crack my neck, I can actually build safety into my own body systems. I'm in control of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Right.
let's talk about the anxiety of money. But we've already spent 5 minutes breathing, and you've been able to control that. You've built
Right.
yourself a platform of safety.
Right.
Now, what money do you have? Let's take a portion. Let's come up with some solutions. Here are some expenditures coming you can put off for a late. Now you're coming up with answers where the locus of control moves from outside to inside. And I think one of the keys in anxiety is that question of where is the locus of control? Where's the focus?
Mm-hmm.
If the
Mm-hmm.
focus is in the closet, under the bed, in the dark, as long as there's a closet, a bed, and a darkness, I'm going to still be scared.
Right.
If it's in me and I can solve my own fear, at least a little,
Right.
now the locus of control is mine. And that
Right.
changes the entire game plan, I think, regarding the
Right.
area of anxiety. When I interact with people on the internet, some I know and many I don't, what is it that's causing your fear? I saw a meme or I went to a website. Who produced that website? I don't know. So why is your reaction to a website possibly caused by a Russian nationalist or some mean troll that just likes having fun with people? You don't really know where that came from, but your reaction is, I saw a copperhead in
Right.
our neighborhood
Right.
and don't go walking in the grass because snakes are in the grass.
Right.
Well, I live in upstate New York. There are not copperheads in our grass. Now, that said, years ago, I was changing the oil in my car up on jacks in the grass of our backyard, and I heard an odd sound in my right ear. And I turned my head, and there was a garter snake. No, I'm not kidding. No further than 4 inches from my face, rearing up. And I'm underneath a car changing oil, and its tongue went like 4 inches from my eye. I sat up under the car, banged my head on the frame, the chassis of the vehicle, cut my forehead. I've got oil, blood, everything coming down off my face. I scooch myself up from my wife starts screaming because I'm covered in black oil and blood. And I said, I just saw a snake. She doesn't like snakes. And so I went scooting out from underneath, and here comes this garter snake, maybe a foot and a half long. And after we all calmed down, she said, that's what you were scared of? I said, you have to understand the situation. I hear a sound. I look over, and right there is a snake flicking its tongue out at me. And I said, my reaction was not a response. It was an instantaneous gut reaction. But the point is, when I see a meme saying there's copperheads in the grass, there really are not copperheads in the grass. I can
Exactly.
still react with a great deal of
Exactly.
anxiety and fear. So if the locus of control comes into me, at least to some degree, I have a step towards
Right.
dealing with addressing the anxiety, which is
Right.
actually not outside of me, it's actually inside of me.
Right. Right. No, and I would say that's very, very real because when back to the whole issue to me of control, which brings us back to the place of security and safety, is that the dynamic of which we live in is that we are taught in our culture that we have the ability to control, all this stuff, and we don't. And so that sense of being able to uh, come back to myself and ask that very simple question, which we ask in our training all the time, is about what are the things that I have actual ability to be able to change and have influence on. It's the what's it doing to you and what can you do about it? And I think that so many times what happens within the anxiety spectrum is that we're we have so much of this input of into our lives which is not real many times, which is the trolling, which is I mean, some of this, it's amazingly I mean, you find yourself, if you're not careful, and I'm a reader and you're a reader, and we spend a lot of time reading books as well as what's articles on the internet and all those kinds of things. But eventually, particularly within the online world, for me, I have to just step back because it's like, whoa, there's just so much of this that's coming in. Even though I feel like I'm starting to slide in my perspective of getting, I could get anxious about, I mean, pick a number of things um, that that just causes, those kinds of dynamics. Excuse me, of fretting, of deep-seated worry, of all those kinds of issues, when it really does have to come back to what is it I can control within my own sphere and make a difference there. Excuse me. So,
I saw
and I was,
I saw a video clip on, I think it was my Facebook feed today. I watched some of those videos just for fun. And there was one that I saw this morning out for my morning walk that was quite intriguing. And it really had to do with the different topics. People could find this online. There was some very high level Navy commander, very high, decorated hat, lots of ribbons and everything all over his uniform. And he was talking about being a Navy SEAL, which is the very, very high level
right,
training and extremely high risk,
right,
a lot of danger. And this commander was talking about what he went through at the beginning of SEAL training. And he said, he shook his head and he said, it seemed at the time to be the most irrelevant, meaningless, foolish aspect of Navy training. But every single morning when we were new recruits, the commanders came into our bunk and they inspected our bedding. And we had to have the sheets on square corners. You could bounce a quarter off the sheets and blankets because they were so taut. It had to be done right. And he goes, we as young recruits are saying this is worthless, that we're going to be warriors, and they're having us make our bed in the morning. And the commander said, the reality is when you get out of your sack, if you are in control of how you leave that bedding, you've already accomplished something in the day that was in your hands to do.
right,
You have accomplished something and it's yours. And he said, we learned that every single day you make your bed, you take care of your food gear, you dress yourself properly so that when you face the next challenge of the day, you've already got 3 accomplishments
right.
done right, because that's the kind of person you are. And I thought that is incredible insight into the
Yeah,
conversation on
yeah,
anxiety. If life
exactly,
is out of control all the time,
exactly.
you have no idea what's coming, anxiety is going to be a constant presence.
Right,
But you get out of bed, if you make your bed, you don't necessarily make it Navy style, but you make it properly. You eat your breakfast, and whether it's a single napkin or fork, knife, spoon, and plate, put it away properly. It takes a few seconds. Dress yourself properly. You've done 3 things that give you control over your day. When you
exactly.
get ready to come home to bed, your bed is going to be made and waiting for you.
Right,
You're in control of that. And now that becomes a way of dealing with anxiety, because I exert the management of my life because
right,
I choose to.
right, right. And I would totally agree with it. I think that has so much to do within the framework of why we have, I think, many times our children and why we're frustrated and we're anxious because we're going so many different directions. We come back to the place of where we should have solace, if you will, our home, and it's in chaos. And You know, and it's like, okay, how do you expect there to begin to have any place that has a foundation of where you can, your child particularly, can sit down and say, yeah, this is good and right, and it's okay. It doesn't have to be moving all the time.
Right.
It doesn't have to be in the constant go, 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 go. And unfortunately, when we buy into that, which the marketing world wants us to buy into, it's very destructive in the end, because all of a sudden you find yourself in that very same place of saying, why is it I'm always just feeling out of, if you will, sorts? This sense of just, I'm like this all the time. It's like, well, there's no place in your life that is got some that's solid for you to be able just to stop and rest and think, and then move from there. Because you're right, you don't have, you haven't gotten any kind of sense of direction, if you will, or you have not gotten any place that you've had actually, you've been okay, because you've accomplished those things to set your
Right.
trajectory for the day. And so you're constantly flailing around out here trying to figure out how to do that. And your kids don't have the emotional ability. They, depending on where they are and their age, but they have, they're just going to follow your lead at that level, which is not going to be a good thing, because they have less ability, far less ability
So
than
here
you as an
that
adult.
raises an interesting question why children would have anxiety if their parent is a helicopter parent and you're drinking out of a blue glass, you set it down. If your spouse or your mom or somebody else in your life picks up your blue glass, takes it to the sink for you, you don't have any responsibility. You're
Exactly.
not in control of what happens around you. So if your child is done with a snack and they just throw the garbage or whatever, leave the plate, encouraging or requiring them to manage their own life shifts the locus of control back into their hands. They're
Exactly.
going to
Exactly.
complain, they're going to argue, they're going to
Yep.
fight, they're going to not
Yep.
do it.
Yep.
But the degree to which you shift the locus of control back towards them, you will help them solve anxious
Correct.
feelings.
Correct. That's exactly right. And it comes back to that aspect of which we talk about so much in our own trainings, is like, until you start owning it
Right,
and realize it's yours, that you have to fix at this level, you're not the victim.
right.
Uh, but if you make your child an enabled victim, guess what? They they're going to struggle for a long time with that whole aspect of anxiousness. All
And they
right.
may
Well,
actually for the rest of their life. I mean, that becomes a
yeah,
lifelong pattern.
exactly. All right. I think we're about there today.
Yeah.
So this has been good. Good talking with you. So thanks for listening to Gripping Reality.
Number
This is what
51,
number 51.
anxiety.
This is West Coast Mike.
East Coast Mike.
You guys have a great day.
Yeah.